On today's show, we're talking about the first day of spring training, Jacob deGrom's first bullpen, and Texas bringing back an old friend for their bullpen. Talk about all that and more on this episode of Locked On Rangers. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Rangers, your daily Texas Rangers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are locked onto the Texas Rangers. I'm Bryce Patrick, a cripplingly addicted Texas Rangers fan, covering this team for 11 seasons, including all 6 as the founder and host of this podcast. Thank you all so much for making Locked On Rangers your first listen every single day. If you're not already, you can follow me on Twitter at Bryce Patrick. You can follow the show at Locked On Rangers. Hit subscribe on your favorite podcasting platform and on YouTube, where the best way you can help grow the show is to comment nearly any single thing below. Now, on today's show, we're talking about Jacob deGrom's first bullpen of spring training. We're talking about another injury that popped up, how the Rangers are handling it, what it means for the first day of spring training, full squad workouts, and an old friend maybe coming to help in the bullpen. Before we get into all of that, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Download the app or head to FanDuel.com to get started. Now, on Saturday, the moment everyone was waiting for, the first beat writer videos of Jacob deGrom throwing a bullpen this spring, and the comments afterwards, just watching it in general, just made me feel just good, so many good feelings in my heart, in my soul, in my baseball essence. There are few things that bring me more joy than in watching Jacob deGrom throw baseballs in Texas Rangers accoutrement. But the comments afterward, I mean, this is just indicative of who Jacob deGrom is, that guys who have been around baseball for their whole life, and their whole life is, 70 years or 69 years, like Bruce Bochy, that they are saying this is something truly spectacular. This is something astonishing. I've seen a lot of baseball thrown, but this guy, Jacob deGrom, just throws it so good. He throws so many baseballs so good. And I am just so excited that he is fully healthy heading into this season. What exactly his workload looks like, I did an entire episode a couple weeks back trying to, find some kind of comparisons of guys his age with this many surgeries, with, this kind of track record and all of that. And I did my best to come up with an answer, but still I don't feel like I have that good of an idea of what to expect from Jacob deGrom, what he expects from himself. He said he wants to make 30 starts. He's probably not pushing the 200 innings limit or so, but he wants to go out there and make those 30 starts. He does feel fully good, fully ready to go. Everything is at full tilt. And even his bullpen was just fully Jacob deGrom. Kyle Higashioka, who had caught Mariano Rivera early on in his minor league career. He didn't make his major league debut while Rivera was still in the big leagues, but he compared the command that Jacob deGrom has to the greatest closer in the history of the game, except instead of throwing 90, 92 mile an hour cutters, Jacob deGrom's throwing 100, 102 mile an hour fastballs and still dotting it up precisely where he wants, which is what makes him so incredibly special, is not just that he has the precision command, not control. He has control. Control is throwing strikes whatsoever, staying in the strike zone. Command is throwing strikes exactly where you want to. Good strikes, dotting the corners, on the edges, living on the periphery of the strike zone. And when you do that with special stuff, and you throw the special stuff exactly where you want, that's when you start to have seasons and success like Jacob deGrom does, of just being absolutely untouchable. But one of my favorite quotes talking about this bullpen was from Higashioka. He said he missed his first pitch by 4 inches, said terrible, and then I never had to move my glove again. That's Jacob deGrom in a nutshell. Just a little bit off with the first of his pitches in this bullpen. It's like, ugh, that sucked. That was awful. That was so terrible. And then proceeds to hit every single spot for the rest of his pen. Now, maybe it's being dramatic, just blowing up and gushing over one bullpen session. Maybe that's more of an indication that there is just so little going on in the first week of spring training. But really, there are not that many of these bullpen sessions from now until the start of the season. There are not that many spring training games. that we will see between now and the start of the season. And with Jacob deGrom, every single thing that he does from now until he is done with the length of his contract, every single baseball activity that he participates in is edge of your seat news because of how unhealthy he has been the last couple of years. I am still in the camp that I think that this is going to be a guy who goes out there and makes 25, 30 starts this year. What the workload is allowed to even look like, I wouldn't imagine it gets much higher than 150 innings in the regular season. If he goes out there and does make those 30 starts and averages 5 innings per start, that's 150 innings. That's a decent workload, and you really want him. If he gives you 30 starts and 150 innings, this team's going to make the playoffs. They just are. And you're going to want him to make a few starts in the postseason, and you're going to want him fresh and at his best, or at least as fresh as you can be after throwing 150 innings at age 36, 37. There's only so much freshness you can have, but I think the Rangers are just so banking on deGrom. So much hinges on his health, and that we're going to have, 30-something? No, not even 30-something. We have 38 days until opening day right now. He'll probably throw 10 to 12 more times in between now and then. That's including bullpens. That's including spring training starts. Yeah, not that many when you really sit down and think about it. That's averaging one outing every 3 days or so. That seems about right. Usually a starting pitcher is throwing once every 5 days or 6 days. We'll see exactly how often he is starting in these spring training games. I don't know if he's going to start the Rangers' first spring training game, which, by the way, is on Friday. We are less than a week away from the first spring training game that will be at Surprise, on the road in Surprise, their own stadium, against the Royals, as every first game of the spring is. We've still got quite a bit of time before our first televised game. That's going to be March 12th. That'll be at home against the Reds. We're still, feels like so long away from any of these games being televised, but we get a lot of radio broadcasts. We might end up with an extra spare TV broadcast. I wish they would broadcast more games early on in spring training. The only part of me that wishes I was a Yankee or Dodgers fan is just because they get so many of their spring training games, if not all of their spring training games broadcast. Same with the Boston Red Sox. So many of those games are televised, and I want to see every single bit of every single player who is in these spring training games, and I want to see every single bullpen of Jacob deGrom. I am hanging on every throw, because not only because it's incredible, because of the nerves that I have, because of how much worry that I have about him just staying healthy, and not just him. I mean, I think I'm more, it's a really close, but in spring training, I think I'm more worried about Josh Young staying healthy because of the random incidents that he has had popped up for basically every single spring training of his life as a professional baseball player. But with every pitch that Jacob deGrom is throwing in his Rangers tenure, I am hanging on it because it is so important. I still can't comprehend how the Texas Rangers in 2023 won the World Series with 6 starts from Jacob deGrom and 30 innings. The math does not math in my head of how incredible that season was, and that is such a big part of it, such to the point where no matter what else is going on, even if the offense doesn't rear back as much as we'd hope, even if this bullpen isn't as good as I was hoping that it would be, even if the rest of the rotation has its bumps and bruises, has its issues, has its setbacks, if you have Jacob deGrom on your team and a reasonably competent group of players around them, which the Rangers most definitely have more than a reasonably competent rest of the 25 men on the opening day roster around Jacob deGrom, you have a chance to win it all. I don't care if there's a super team. I don't care if there are multiple super teams. I mean, the Dodgers, the Phillies, the Braves. Nobody in the American League really frightens me all that much. But if you have Jacob deGrom on your roster and you have Corey Seager on your postseason roster, it might sound insane that just two guys give you that much of a chance if everybody around them is just fine, but they really do. He is just that special of a pitcher, and it is such a bummer for the entirety of baseball that he has not been healthy for the last couple of years, because when he is pitching, I've said this a million times, I'll say it a million more, he is the best freaking pitcher I have ever seen. And that's why every single bullpen, every single spring training game, every single time he's just walking around on the outfield, I am so locked into every single thing he does on a baseball diamond, because he is just that special. Coming up, we're going to talk about the Rangers having a couple of injuries, not to Jacob deGrom, to a couple of pitchers who I think could be integral parts of this season. All that and more right after this. This show is brought to you by SelectQuote. In sports, having a winning strategy is everything. It's how the best teams make it to the Super Bowl, the World Series, and the Olympics. The same goes for life. Having a strategy to take life insurance from SelectQuote that can protect your financial legacy and keep your family's future secure. SelectQuote makes it easy to find the perfect life insurance policy. As one of America's leading insurance brokers with nearly 40 years of experience, they've helped over 2 million customers find $700 billion in coverage since 1985. What sets SelectQuote apart is their personal touch, because unlike other brokers that offer a one-size-fits-all policy, their licensed agents tailor coverage to fit your unique needs. If you're in good health, you might even qualify for same-day coverage for up to $5 million of no medical exam required. And it's more affordable than you'd think. You can get up to $1 million in coverage for as little as $20 a month. Get the right life insurance for you for less at SelectQuote.com/lockedon. Go to SelectQuote.com/lockedon today to get started. That's SelectQuote.com/lockedon. SelectQuote. They shop, you save. Shout out to the Everydayers for making Locked On Raiders your first listen every single day. On tomorrow's show, I'll talk a little bit about John Gray, what his role should be, why the Rangers are sticking with him in the rotation, and why hopefully he can be just a little bit better and more durable as a starting pitcher in 2025. Now, the Rangers have had some injuries pop up, just a few minor injuries so far in spring training. Thankfully, nothing too scary at this point. No, this person's having Tommy John, this person's having shoulder surgery, this person's, entire torso was misplaced. Thankfully, none of those so far. Hopefully, none of those at all this spring training, knock on wood. But the first injury of this spring training was Robert Garcia, the left-handed relief pitcher who the Texas Rangers traded Nathaniel Lowe to the Washington Nationals in exchange for this young man who is much better than his surface line stats. I think is going to play a big role in this Rangers pen in 2025. Might end up being the closer. Definitely, I think we'll see a lot of high leverage spots, but he is dealing with nerve irritation in his left forearm. Thankfully, nothing too scary at this point. It's just, they think a little bit of nerves of wanting to, show up and show off because he's with a new team, wants to show, hey, I know y'all traded Nathaniel Lowe for me, and he's a really good player, and I want to show what I can do. I want to just be excited to be a part of a new organization. It happens a lot of times, but he is going to be scheduled to start throwing again on Tuesday. Thankfully, it has been nothing too serious. The things that I worry about with pitchers, if you hear anything with the elbow, normally with a forearm, if there's a strain or a tightness, that's worrying, but nerve irritation, not as much so. Anything with the shoulders are extra scary. There's so many moving parts with shoulders and with pitchers. You can have a Tommy John surgery and come back and be just fine. That happens all the time. Shoulder stuff, though, that's when I start to get concerned. That's the kind of thing that can linger, that can derail careers, that can just really upset things. So if you're a baseball novice and wondering what red flag should I be worried for, if you see guys having forearm strains, if that's an issue, moves up the kinetic chain to the elbow, to the shoulder, to the everything. I mean, elbow, if you hear anything, oh, there's inflammation in the elbow, oh, is UCL is feeling tight or whatever, that's when you say, oh god, that could be a Tommy John that knocks you out for 12 to 16 months. That's the kind of thing where you're like, oh boy, because there's almost always one. It feels like every single team has at least one guy in the organization, whether that's the major league roster or somebody in the minor leagues, it feels like there's always one in spring training, usually within the first, 2 weeks or so. Thankfully, the Rangers haven't had that, though. They have not even had a worry of that. The only other injury concern, not even an injury at this point, really, Emiliano Teodo on Saturday left his bullpen early due to some thumb soreness. He went through a rescheduled throwing session on Sunday and had no issues. That is a great, great sign. Teodo is at this point a starting pitcher. He is almost certainly going to start in AAA this season, but if the Rangers wanted to supplement that bullpen with a little bit more gas, a little bit more nastiness back there, if they are saying, okay, Teodo, you've just not been able to throw strikes at a rate that we need starting pitchers to throw strikes at, and also you could just help this bullpen too much to let you sit there in AAA and develop as maybe a starting pitcher, maybe not. But I don't think the Rangers will make that move, at least out of spring training. I don't think that will be the case with Teodo. A thumb injury, you're not too worried about that, and the fact that he was able to go through a throwing session literally the next day makes me feel really, really happy and concerned. And this week is kind of that time, just the early stages of spring training, the first couple weeks. If the Rangers make it through the first couple weeks, and none of those 6 guys that are projected to at least fight for 7 guys, say, that are projected to fight for a starting rotation spot, whether that's Jacob deGrom, Nathan Eovaldi, John Gray, Tyler Mahle, Cody Bradford, Kumar Rocker, Jack Leiter, you really hope that if none of those guys have any problems, setbacks, anything in the first couple of weeks, that will be nothing less than a small miracle, because there's always some kind of setback. There's always something. And, we didn't go through this with Jacob deGrom in 2024 because he was just out. He had already had the surgery. He had already bit the bullet. And I think a lot of deGrom's injury concerns and the time that he missed from, 2021, 2022, those final seasons with the Mets, I think a lot of that was just avoiding what was going to be unavoidable, of having a second Tommy John surgery. When you're throwing that hard, you're throwing that much, you had that much of a workload, it was going to happen. The wear and tear had been done on that UCL, and, once he's finally had that surgery, but even leading into 2023, leading into that season, he didn't come into camp, fully healthy. There was a little bit of a setback very early on in spring training. So the entirety of spring training, we're like, okay, is he going to be built up? Is he going to be, healthy for opening day? Is he going to go on the IL? Is he already going to have Tommy John before he even throws for the Rangers? And, he was healthy for opening day. He wasn't fully built up. He only threw 60, 75 pitches or however many it was on that super wacky opening day game. One of the wackier ones that the Rangers have had, that 2023 opening day game against the Phillies, where deGrom looked untouchable in the first inning, and then just a bunch of really weird batted ball luck knocked him out in like 4 innings in that first game. But there was all of that will they, won't they? This year, at least heading into the first, he threw before pitchers and catchers reported. He threw a bullpen that day before on Tuesday. Pitchers and catchers reported on Wednesday of last week. Then he threw another bullpen on Saturday, and everything is good. Everything is healthy. Everything is fine. He headed into the season fully healthy, which is why I talked about so much in the back half of last year, people being like, oh, why don't they just shut down Jacob deGrom? Why is he pitching in any games at all? Because he had to complete the rehab. Whether he did that at the big league level or at the minor league level or in simulated games, no matter what it was, you need to complete the rehab to get back to fully healthy so you can have that normal offseason. It was the same with Rocker. They shut down Mahle because the rehab wasn't going well, because he was having some shoulder fatigue, and you don't want to make that worse. That's why they shut down Mahle and let Rocker and deGrom keep pitching, because you have to finish off the rehab to get back to healthy, to have all of the normal things that go into an offseason. And now they've had that, both those guys. And Mahle, as far as we know, is fully healthy in camp. Everything is just A-okay with all of these guys heading into the rotation, and that is just a really, really good sign. And I'm hoping that I honestly struggle to find things to talk about this week, because that means that everybody's healthy, everything is good, there is nothing, derailing things, and I just had to get more creative in the things that I talk about. I'm really hoping that in this week before spring training games start, That is my sincere desire, is that everything is good to the point where it's boring and we are all just living through a normal spring training without any catastrophic injuries, without any, everything in the sky is falling down. Oh my gosh, Corey Seager is doing this. Oh, he's rehabbing from a surgery. Oh my gosh, Jacob deGrom is not pitching at all until June, July, August. Who the heck knows? Oh my gosh, Jonah Heim caught a bazillion games, and so he's only going to catch 10 spring training games or whatever it is. We don't really have to do that this spring training. It is significantly less dramatic than last spring training. There are much fewer just obvious storylines and things to watch, which honestly I'm grateful for. I hope they can just have a normal spring training, everything go great, and then just head into the season and kick everybody's butts and be fantastic again. That is my hope. Spring training does not have to be interesting. It just has to be baseball. And that's all the Rangers need. But speaking of some Rangers, some old friends, talk about a minor league signing who will get an invite to Major League Camp, a former Texas Rangers bullpen arm, and a closer. Is that going to solve the Rangers closer problem? I'm not entirely sure. We'll talk about it. All that and more right after this. This show is brought to you by FanDuel. When the games tip off, NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get in on it than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game, so even if you missed the opening tip-off or want to bet on a fourth quarter comeback, you can stay in the action. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into same-game parlays. They've got all kinds of odds on NBA right now. They've got some NCAA basketball. They've got some NHL. They've also got some World Series odds right now. The Rangers have the 8th best odds, plus 2,500 to win the 2025 World Series. Tied with the Boston Red Sox. You're looking at league winners. If you think that the Rangers are going to make the World Series but not quite win it, they have the 3rd best odds to win the American League in the postseason, behind the Yankees plus 280, which feels pretty aggressive. The Baltimore Orioles at plus 600 and the Houston Astros at plus 850. Red Sox and Rangers both tied, actually, with the Seattle Mariners as well, at plus 1,000 for the 4th best odds to win the American League. So go check out all the action right now. New FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Shout out to the Everydayers for making Locked On Rangers your first listen every single day. On Wednesday's show, I'll be back and talking about 5 burning questions for this spring training. What is burning in my mind? The questions that I must ask of the Texas Rangers in this spring training. Now, the Rangers have brought back an old friend, a former closer. For all you clamoring for a closer, a guy with some saves. He is back in the Texas Rangers organization. That's right, Joe Barlow signing a minor league deal with the Texas Rangers with an invite to Major League spring training. Barlow is 29 years old, the former closer for the Texas Rangers on a season where they didn't have a whole lot of bullpen options or a whole lot of winning. He's had some pretty decent seasons. I mean, in 2021, his first big league season, he closed out in 18 games, finished off 18 games, 11 saves that season, then 13 saves the next season in 2022. Not a very winning season for the Rangers, and then pitched again in 2023, a World Series champion with a World Series ring. Didn't pitch in a whole lot of high leverage spots for the Rangers in 2023 because the Rangers had just a few better options at relief. In 2024, he did not pitch in the big leagues, signed a deal with the Chicago White Sox, but had a right rotator cuff strain and missed basically the entire season. Pitched a little bit in the minor leagues trying to rehab for them, but he was cut in July of that season and has not pitched in the big leagues since 2023 with the Rangers. And he has 24 career saves, so, well, there's your closer, I guess. No, that is not going to happen, but Barlow does have an outside shot to make camp with the Rangers. Had a very, very good slider, had a fastball that was much better in 2022 and 2021. In 2021, he had a 1.55 ERA in 29 innings pitched, 27 strikeouts in those 29 innings. And then 35 innings pitched, a 3.86 ERA when he had 13 saves in 35 innings, 28 strikeouts in 2022. Then a 4.6 ERA in 2023. He just wasn't quite as effective the more times he was out there in the big leagues. Not a guy who throws real hard. The fastball was averaging below 95 miles an hour every single season. The highest it was 94.5 miles an hour. Had some good life to it. Really, the slider is his best pitch, but not a huge strikeout guy, not a huge velocity guy. And for this Rangers pen, I think a lot of the concerns about not having a capital C closer are overblown, but concerns about just the back end stuff, nastiness in the pen in general, I do still feel that strongly. I mean, you don't have to be throwing gas to be an effective reliever. We saw that with Kirby Yates. He was averaging 93 miles an hour or so with his fastball, but it came from behind his ear from a weird angle. Hitters just couldn't see it, and that paired with the absolutely devastating slider made him incredibly good. But this bullpen has a lot of different types of pitchers in it. I mean, Chris Martin is more of a fastball splitter kind of guy. Cutter is kind of his area of expertise. Robert Garcia is a lefty with a nasty changeup. I mean, just absolutely devastating changeup. And he's going to be really, really good against right-handed pitchers. Maybe the Rangers can help improve his slider and his fastball a bit. Those two pitches weren't quite as good. But again, he's also not a guy with high velocity. Garcia averaged 94.5 miles an hour in 2024 with that fastball velocity. It's never been up there in the mid-90s range. That's kind of been really about where it's averaged. The only time he pitched in the big leagues was the season before. Averaged 0.2 miles an hour slower, so 94.3. But again, that changeup is so darn good. That is his primary pitch. You look at other guys in this pen. You got a funky lefty in Hobie Milner. You've got a righty who is also a changeup specialist in Jacob Webb. You have Sean Armstrong, who's not throwing super hard. You have maybe Jesse Chavez will end up making this opening day roster. He's heading into his age 41, 42 season. He's not exactly throwing gas, and that's really the one thing that this pen lacks. You like to have guys who do different things, who give you different angles, who can attack different types of hitters, who can thrive in different situations. That's a good thing. Diversity in the pen is a good thing because they are going to have to face a lot of different types of hitters in the major leagues. And so having guys who look different, who you're not all throwing out there in the same arm slot, the guys can see what they look like and see what one guy looks like and have a good idea of how everybody else looks. That's a good thing. But I think all of these guys are going to be at least fine. I think Chris Martin's going to be really good. I think Robert Garcia might be really good. Hopefully he can get back and be healthy and everything be all fine. And this nerve issue will be something we completely forget about. But the one thing that this bullpen doesn't have, and honestly hasn't really had in a while, outside of Aroldis Chapman in the back half of 2023, there's just not a lot of elite velocity. I mean, Leclerc averaged in the mid 90s with his fastball. You could run it up there to 98. We'll see Josh Sborz, who averages around 95, 96 miles an hour with his fastball, and that's got some really good properties with it, not just the velocity, but also the spin rate and how it looks coming out of his arm. And he's more about the breaking balls, the slider, the curveball. That's more of what makes him as nasty as he is. But the Rangers could just use a little bit more gas in this pen. That's one thing I would like them to add. I don't think they would add it by signing anybody. All of those signings with elite velo, those guys are off the board. But it would come from internal guys. It would come from guys like Emiliano Teodo, like Skylar Hales. Really, that's mainly it. Those are mainly those two guys that have that kind of primo gas that can run up there into the triple digits. I mean, Teodo is, as a starter for 5 innings, is sitting in the upper 90s, 97 to 98, 99, touching as high as 104 is his career high, I believe, if I'm remembering that correctly. And he's also got just a wipeout breaking ball. And if he was in the bullpen, he could just straight up scrap that changeup. I think it's a fine pitch. I think it's a good pitch. I think he needs to stick as a starter. But if they do pull the plug on that starting experiment, Teodo, I think, could be a huge addition for this bullpen. I think Skylar Hales is going to be a big addition for this bullpen. I mean, Mark Church isn't, touching triple digits, but he's, sitting around 95, 96 with that fastball, and his slider is his best pitch too. I think that he could really add something to this pen, but that's just one part of this pen that I do have an issue with. If they sign Kirby Yates, they still wouldn't have, elite premium velocity. I wouldn't be as concerned about not having that, because just having more swing and miss in a bullpen is such an important thing. It's part of why I think John Gray could absolutely thrive in this bullpen and help give them something that they need, not just being a closer, because having a closer is just one guy in the pen. The bullpen is 5, 6, 7 guys. You need all of them to be good. You're going to need them for all kinds of different situations. Now, the closer is the most important, but this is just one little thing. If I was going to nitpick, and I am nitpicking the Rangers offseason, one part of this bullpen I would like them to address is just getting some more premium velocity. I think it will come up with guys like Hales, like Teodo. I think we will see them in the big leagues at some point in the pen this season, but for right now, heading into the season, it's just a little bit of an area of concern. Now, that's going to do it for today's show. Thank you all so much for listening and subscribing, and until next time, don't forget to enjoy baseball.